September 11th, 2001 was a day that will be remembered as a turning point in the United States of America's history. The events that occurred on this day left thousands killed and injured and millions suffering. 4 planes had taken off early in the morning with Al-Qaeda terrorist members on board. All terrorists were well equipped with weapons and had plans to take over the planes. 2 planes crashed into the World Trade Center's Twin Towers. Another hit a very small portion of the Pentagon, and the last one crashed in a field in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. Over 3,000 people were killed on September 11th, 2001. The National September 11th Memorial was created in honor of these brave men, women, and children who passed away. 9/11 was a turning point in the emotional impact on our country and people in our country.
One of the most immediate and recognizable effects was the impact on people's emotions. Stress levels suddenly increased in tons of people. A study done 3 to 5 days after the attacks showed that 44% of adults had at least one extreme stress symptom. 5 to 8 weeks later, 7.5% of New Yorkers reported symptoms of PTSD or post-traumatic stress disorder. Another 9.7% showed signs of depression. But stress was not just seen in New York. 2 months after the attacks, 17% of the U.S. showed PTSD. Even 1 year after, 5 to 8% of people showed PTSD symptoms. This continues to affect us every day. But emotions of sadness weren't just changed. There was a major rise in patriotic feelings. Every person had an American flag on their house. People had a unity that gave a boost of morale. But national patriotism continued long after the attacks. A poll taken in 2005 found that 81% of people said that patriotism was important to them. This number is still increasing. Patriotism continue to rise across all ethnicities and religions. This is a real turning point in how people see their country.
The Transportation Security Administration, also known as the TSA, was created after September 11, 2001 to strengthen the security of transportation, to ensure the safety of all passengers, and to prevent similar attacks from happening again. There are still threats against aviation security, but the TSA is doing everything they can to address them. A few layers of the TSA's security include airport checkpoints, intelligence gathering and analysis, checking passenger manifest against watch lists, random K-9 team searches, federal flight deck officers, and more. Ever since September 11th, the Transportation Security Administration has been taking significant steps to keep America safe. If the TSA was in place on 9/11, it would have been nearly impossible for September 11th, 2001 to have ever happened. The attack on September 11th was a major impact on our country and was a turning point in security all over the world.
The Iraq War started on March 20th, 2003, involving Iraq and the United States of America, with 35 countries supporting the USA. This war was started mainly because of 9/11 and the greed of Saddam Hussein, who used to be a dictator of Iraq. He only thought of himself, and he made his people live in poverty, while he had everything anyone could possibly ask for. He used his money to create a military to start war instead of helping his people. Here, let's attack Kuwait and plunder it. As my commanders, you and your men can take all the plunder you want and kill anyone you want. Kuwait and the other countries that were being invaded by Iraq called the USA for help. The war was, of course, the Iraq War. When it was over, those countries asked the USA to stay in case Iraq bothered them again. The USA agreed to stay, just in case. But this didn't sit well with one person in particular, Osama bin Laden. It was fine the USA protected his country of Saudi Arabia. But once what had to be done was done, bin Laden wanted the USA to leave. This is probably the most important cause of 9/11 and the Afghanistan War, making it a turning point in history. Osama bin Laden wanted a direct attack on the USA because they stayed. He considered himself a prophet of Muhammad, and he needed a country to rule, so he decided Afghanistan was the country. Bin Laden helped the Afghani people get the Russians out of Afghanistan, which then was easy to take over with his Taliban party. Then bin Laden began to plan his attack on the United States. This attack is the turning point in history of 9/11. Bin Laden pulled off his plan of 9/11 nearly perfectly. 3,000 people were killed from the 9/11 terrorist attack. The USA believed bin Laden, the head of the Al-Qaeda, was behind 9/11. The Taliban had controlled most of Afghanistan for about 6 years, but was overthrown in 2001 by American and British forces and the Northern Alliance during the Afghanistan War. This war is still going on and is the effect of 9/11, a very important turning point in history.
One of the most controversial effects of 9/11 is the Patriot Act. It includes 10 sections allowed by the government. The first allows law enforcement to confiscate the property of any foreign person who aided an attack on the United States. The second allows surveillance of a person through any means necessary. This allows law enforcement to access websites they visit, phone calls, text messages, or any communications. This is one of the most controversial. Many people think it is a violation of the Fourth Amendment. This request for information is called a national security letter. One service provider named Nicholas Merrill would not turn over the internet information about his client. He filed a constitutional charge against the Patriot Act in 2004. After he got a settlement in 2010, he was not allowed to state specific information about the case. He believes this is a violation of freedom of speech under the Patriot Act. He is one of many who think 9/11 was not necessarily a turning point for the better. Some support the Patriot Act completely. One article says that the attacks on the Patriot Act are fraught with misinformation and that the government has the right to these powers. Though there are many controversies on the Patriot Act, it is still a major turning point in the war on terror.
September 11, 2001 was a turning point in the world's history, in trade history, and in business history. It also changed millions of people's lives and caused a huge emotional impact on our country. September 11, 2001 will never be forgotten throughout the world. Because of September 11, 2001, two wars, the war in Afghanistan and the war in Iraq, started, although now the Iraq war has already commenced. There also has been a new department, the Transportation Security Administration, and the Patriot Act have both been in place after September 11. September 11, 2001 was a turning point in the history of war and security throughout the world.